You're good, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Today is the 2nd of July, and we are all meeting today for our regularly scheduled Las Cruces Economic Recovery Ad Hoc Board meeting. It is currently 10:02, and we are going to get this meeting started. Cynthia, do you know if we have quorum right now? I believe we do.
Yeah, I think we have 7 out of 11.
Okay, perfect. So we do have quorum, so we are good to go on this. On the agenda, we have any conflicts of interest. If there are anyone that has any conflicts of interest, if you will please raise your hand now so we can call on you and go from there. Okay, as I see no hands being raised, I'm going to go ahead and say that there's no conflicts of interest with anyone on this board at this moment. Moving on, we do have the agenda that was sent out. If anyone would like to make a motion to accept the agenda as is, or any amendments to the agenda, we could hear those now.
Debbie Moore moved to accept the
Mr.
agenda.
Harris.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'll second it.
We actually did not get a motion yet, I don't believe. Debbie was just asking for time.
I moved.
Oh, we do have a motion on the floor from Ms. Debbie Moore to accept the agenda, and we have a second from Mr. Harris. Do we have any discussion? I have Ms. Montgomery's hand raised.
Sorry, I just noticed that last week we turned the chat box off because they're streaming it live, and I didn't know if we wanted to do that again this week.
Ms. Montgomery, it's really hard to hear you. If you could speak up a little bit for us.
It might not be on my right microphone. Can you hear me now?
Much better, thank you.
I just switched microphones. I just noticed the chat box was on, and last week we took the chat box down because it's being live streamed.
Yeah, I can take
That
care of
is correct. Thank you, Dominic. I appreciate that. I did not catch that.
That's all.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the agenda as presented in front of us? As seeing none, I'm going to call on everyone by name, and if you can come on camera and just say that your vote yea or nay to accept the agenda as is. Ms. Debbie Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Michael Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Doug Cohen.
Yes.
Ms. Jolene Martinez, are you here today? She's not with us this afternoon. Ms. Sharon Thomas. I do not see Ms. Thomas either. Ms. Veronica Archuleta.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Jane Bloom. I don't see Mrs. Bloom on here either. Mr. George Miller, I do not see. Ms. Brooke Montgomery.
Yes. Yay.
Mr. Ron Fitzherbert.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the agenda has been accepted as presented. So we will be moving on to accepting the minutes. We do have 2 sets of minutes that we were sent from our first meeting, as well as our second meeting that we had as a with the full board, and the first meeting that we had as a partial board. Mr. Doug Cohen.
Yes, I'd like to make just a slight correction on the minutes for the June the 8th, just because I misnamed one of the entities that was providing some information for us, but they were kind enough to do so, and so they should be properly named. And it's the correction is the National Center for Life and Liberty. If we could just correct that, please.
Can you point that out in the minutes where that's located, sir? Page number and line, so we can have that in the
Yes, well, on my, let's see, on my minutes, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I believe page 7. About towards the bottom of it, it said, it says board member Cowan has been working with.
Okay, and what do we need to change that to, Mr. Cohen?
Just-
national.
Yes, sir. If you would just change that to the National Center for Life and Liberty.
Okay, thank you. Any other amendments to the minutes as are presented? As I'm seeing, oh, Mr. Harris.
I was just gonna ask, how important are like typos and things? I didn't see anything seriously, meaningfully wrong.
Typos can be corrected. Yeah, it's up to us if we want to get that nitpicky with them.
Okay, I didn't see anything that needed to be that nitpicky.
Okay, usually it's substance over grammar. Okay, as seeing no other corrections to the minutes, we're going to go ahead, since we did have an amendment to the minutes from the meeting on the 8th. If we can have a motion to accept the minutes from the meeting as an 8th as amended.
I'll motion that. This is Michael Harris.
I have a motion for Mr. Harris. Mr. Cohen, you have your hand raised.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Harris. We have a second by Mr. Cohen to accept the minutes from the meeting on June 8th as amended. Any discussion further? Seeing none, I will call out everyone's name. If you can please come on video and give me your vote as stated. Miss Debbie Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Michael Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Doug Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Okay. Trying to see if anyone else has joined us. Ms. Veronica Archuleta,
Yes.
Miss Jane Bloom is not with us. Miss Brooke Montgomery.
Yay.
Thank you. Mr. Ron Fitzherbert.
Abstain, not in attendance.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Chair Rachelle, yes. Motion does pass to accept minutes as amended. Moving on to the minutes of June 18th that were sent out, since we're approving both minutes from our last 2 meetings. If I can get a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll motion to accept again. This is Michael Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I have a motion on the floor to accept minutes as is. Do I hear a second?
Brooke Montgomery, for the record, I second that motion.
I have a motion on the floor from Mr. Harris and a second from Ms. Montgomery to accept the minutes as is. Any discussion on the minutes as presented? Seeing none, I will go through once again and call you by name for your vote. Ms. Debbie Moore.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Michael Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Doug Cohen.
Yes.
Ms. Veronica Archuleta.
Yes.
Ms. Brooke Montgomery.
Yay.
Mr. Ron Fitzherbert.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, motion does pass. Minutes are accepted as presented. Moving on so that we can get through the thick of it. 12 minutes in, everyone. That's pretty good for us. Discussion items. We did have a request to put on the agenda for an adjustment of meeting times and days. That was because the last meeting, they did have to move us to 2 p.m. So if we want to have a discussion on if there's a separate day that works for everyone, we could definitely look at that. There was days and times that were sent to me that we cannot do due to previously scheduled meetings. So I'm going to go ahead and just go over those with everyone really quick, and then we can kind of have a discussion on another time of day for these meetings to go on. So it looks like,
Mr. Chair.
yes, sir.
This is Francisco Payares for the record. I just wanted to if you want me to share my screen, that one everyone can see it. Is that better?
That would be perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please let me know if you can see it on the screen.
Yes, sir. We can definitely see that. Thank you. Okay, everyone. So City Council meets Monday afternoon, so we definitely can't do Monday afternoons. We meet the first, second, third, and fifth Thursdays of the month at 10 a.m. So that is us. The fourth Thursday of the month goes to ASCMV.
Animal service, sir.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Griselda. So they do have the fourth Thursday of the month, which coincides with ours. So we do have to figure out on the fourth Thursday when works for us. It looks like the fourth Tuesday, every Friday starting at 9 a.m. looks like it's out for a special council meeting. And then the LCU board meets the second Thursday of every month, 3 to 5, which means that we can't go past probably like 2:30-ish, I would imagine. So if there's any recommendations for the board as to what we want to do on the fourth Thursday, since we are meeting every single week as it stands right now, I would love to hear a suggestion for discussion. Ms. Montgomery.
I'm okay with Thursday after 5 p.m. I meet with Navajo Tech University bi-weekly on at 9 a.m. I'm sorry, I'm okay with Tuesdays on that fourth week after 5 p.m. But I do have an ongoing standing innovation meeting with Navajo Tech University in the mornings.
Okay, duly noted. So you are free on Tuesday after 5. Is that correct?
Yes. Thank you.
If we can have a member of the staff come on, are we able to meet after business 5 o'clock? Or does that coincide, or does that go against YouTube streaming or anything like this?
Mr. Chair, this is Griselda Martinez for the record. I will ask that question to Dominic, who's our tech support. Dominic, is that an option to have streamlined meetings after 5?
Yeah, we can do that. We do that right now for the planning and zoning meeting. But for final call on that, I would leave that to agent to make that final judgment.
Thank you.
Okay, appreciated. Ms. Debbie Moore, you do have your hand raised.
Mr. Chair, thank you. My suggestion would be perhaps we leave the meetings as they stand right now for the first, second, third, and fifth. And maybe it looks like Thursday afternoon, say from 1:30 to 3 might be accessible on the fourth Thursday. Have it in the afternoon, but leave the others at 10 o'clock as we have now.
Okay, so we also have a suggestion to keep it on Thursdays and move it to the afternoon around 1 p.m. Mr. Michael Harris.
I think Doug has had his hand up before me, but in any case, that's fine with me. My main thing is just knowing ahead of time. So as long as they're scheduled, that suggestion is fine with me.
Okay, Mr. Doug Cohen.
Likewise, I'm in the same situation as probably most. As long as I'm aware of well in advance, I think I can manipulate that kind of schedule. That would work very well, actually, leaving it the way it is, as Ms. Moore said, and then on that fourth Thursday, moving it to 1:30.
Okay. Perfect. Ms. Brooke Montgomery, does that work with your schedule to move it at 1 on Thursdays to keep it on the same day?
Brooke Montgomery for the record. Yes, that works. The only potential issue is that President Flores does his weekly town halls on Thursday at that time, or at 3, I think. But I don't need to be in them. I like to listen. So I can do 1:30ish.
1:30. Okay. Okay, so we do have a few options that have been brought up by other board members, and that is, it sounds like Thursday at 1:30 seems to be the goal right now. So I would definitely entertain a motion to move our fourth Thursday meeting of the month to 1:30. Ms. Debbie Moore.
Mr. Chair, I move that we continue our LCERB meetings at 10 to 11:30, the first, second, third, and fifth Thursdays of each month. The fourth Thursday would be meeting from 1:30 to 3 p.m.
I appreciate that motion. Mr. Doug Cohen.
I second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor and a second to keep our regularly scheduled meetings on the first, second, third, and fifth Thursday of the month at 10 a.m. and to have our fourth Thursday meeting at 1:30 to 3. Is there any discussion from the board? As seeing no hands raised, we will go around the room and call on each one of you again. Miss Debbie Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Michael Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Doug Cohen.
Yes.
Miss Veronica Archuleta.
Sorry, I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand on here on the thing. I was having a hard time. So
I'm sorry.
I couldn't find it. I barely found it. I do, just like all of you, we do have jobs and stuff. So to me, I have marked myself off like every Thursday at 10. I have to move people around, you know, because I do have clients that I meet with every day from Tuesday to Friday. So I try my best to do the 1:30 on the 4th of the month.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
okay.
So you
Yeah.
vote on that. Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate
I'm good. And then
that.
I'm off on Mondays. So I don't know, Monday, right? Monday morning is available also?
Monday is the city council meetings.
Oh, okay. So, okay, that's fine with
Good.
me. I might be absent every once in a while due to work.
No worries.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Yes,
appreciate
I
it.
agree. Okay.
Miss Brooke Montgomery.
Yay.
And then Mr. Ron Fitzherbert.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion does pass. We will be meeting the fourth Thursday of the month at 1:30 via Zoom. Okay, moving on to the next discussion item. We have the New Mexico Safe Promise that we're looking at incorporating, and I believe this discussion item we made into an action item last week, that this is going to be something that we're going to be bringing forth as a board. So we are going to have a little bit of a presentation by staff, I believe, going over kind of the thought process of how this is going to reach out. And once again, if you have questions for anyone during this time, if you can just raise your hand and we will call on you so we can get some questions and answers going as well.
Mr. Chair, this is Francisco Payares for the record. The meeting, sorry, not the meeting, the timeline for the Las Cruces Economic Recovery Board, if I recall properly, on the last meeting, it was mentioned that you wanted something of a proposal to be discussed today, and we have the timeline for that specific proposal. I can share my screen again to show you the timeline of what we were thinking However, Ms. Jamie Rickman will be leading this discussion. Let me just share my screen really quick. Just let me know if you can see this.
Yes, you're good to go.
Okay. Jamie?
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you again this Thursday. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share this information with you. I'd like to kind of go through it, not fast, but at least at a good pace, and then we can add some commentary. And before we do that, I want to make sure that you understand that we welcome any input, obviously, for this. It's very preliminary or draft form. It's only for 3 months because of the given situation is so changeable. And so we have that planned out. Chris was very, very generous in providing some pre-input, which we will check into and consider that into the final product. But this is just basically to give you a real strong idea, which I hope it does, of how we would proceed with starting this awareness campaign. And as Chris had indicated, that would be helpful to understand is that the first month that you see, and I tried to avoid labeling the months because we need some flexibility in timing. So I'm assuming this is going to be like a July, August activity. That this is mostly administrative support to really build that foundation for this campaign. Obviously, you're going to have administrative support throughout the whole campaign. So I just want to make that very clear. So again, this is a 3-month timeline only. And as you can see, I'm not going to read it point by point. You can see these things. I have the time frame, the action, and the hopeful result that we'll have from this. So once we establish the logo, messaging, and the approach, then we can really go gangbusters on this and get it really cranked out. So that's what I'm looking forward to doing. I want to show you also the webpage development and launch. That's going to take about a week to do, if not less. I want to give us that week just for Murphy's Law to be able to deal with things. So that will take about a week, where the content is going to be modeled pretty closely to what the city of Santa Fe promise is. They have the language already there. It's already bilingual. So, that's very much what we're going to be doing. And the other thing too, I'd recommend you do if you're curious about this is that on the city's website, we have a Census 2020 page. If you type in census in the search field of our city website, that is going to be the primary structure that we're going to be using for this. And so I think it has been a successful structure for us for that campaign. I think it'll for this campaign as well. So it compartmentalizes information and makes it easy to find, which is our key goal, right? Is to be able to make information super easy to find, super easy to use. And so moving on, we'll then develop the collateral material, social media campaign, and the scheduling for that with our partners in the community, whoever they may be. We're gonna be asking them to cross-promote, cross-link for everything with social media. And we'll have a program and a plan to be able to help guide people to do that. So it's not like just, hey, like us or whatever, but we'll have a rationale behind that so people can understand why that's important. And then, we'll be able to develop any sort of talking points or pitch points. And then we'll do advertising or PSAs, whatever's appropriate, however we can get the word out there. Mr. Payadas, could you scroll back up just a little bit? There you go. Now, with regarding the target market identification, again, we're going to use a strategy similar to the Census 2020 campaign that we used. And what that means is bringing in everybody as much as possible. And what that entails is the nonprofits, the chambers, all of our resources that we have that comprise our databases, including registered businesses, the interfaith community, et cetera. And to be able to get these numbers up and sharing as much as possible going within the community. If there is something that is missing from this list, it's just a preliminary list, and I'm sure you all have ideas about other groups to communicate to in the community, send that, if you don't mind, please send that information or those ideas to Mr. Payadas, and he and I will coordinate and make sure that those groups get into the mix of communication as well. So again, this is just to give you what's here on the paper, is just to give you an idea of where we're going and what those numbers comprise. Because I think there was some discussion last week about, well, how many people are we trying to reach and that sort of thing. It's basically everybody, but I know we can't just do a shotgun approach like that. We have to really segment our markets and target those markets appropriately to where they can relate to the message. And then Mr. Payadas, you could go ahead and scroll down, please. And then in month 2, which is probably toward the end of month 1, we have to be careful with the public health guidelines with this. So that's why I'm kind of seesawing back and forth on the timing for the news conference. But if all things go well, I mean, our target date, I think, at least at the moment, is August 3rd to be able to have openness in the community again. I don't know if that's going to hold or not, concerning yesterday's news conference, but regardless, we'll have planned a news conference and we'll launch that whenever it's appropriate to do so. And that'll officially kick off the campaign. But before then, we will have communicated with the businesses and some other groups. We'll have the website up and running. We'll have the social media campaign up and running. The news conference will be just that punctuating point to bring more awareness to the project. And but we will have already made some inroads and putting out information in the community before then. And it's a little confusing the way I have that written there, but it's kind of flipped from what I have written. But we'll be communicating through the utility billing and all of these other things. Then we're going into month 3. We'll have a campaign evaluation and review early on, and we'll make sure that there are any adjustments that we need to make that are necessary. And then we'll continue with the awareness campaign as planned through the rest of the month. It's a long month, so we'll have enough time to be able to do that. And the business notification number 2 is just a reminder, just saying, hey, if you need whatever resources you need, they're available here, or, and we're also going to be looking at input from the business community and from everybody essentially for this who's targeted in this campaign, that any of that input will be reviewed and integrated to make adjustments throughout. And so that's just standard practice for what we do. And that way we get that input from the community, we're responsive to the community, and we make adjustments for them as well. And then again, at the end, we'll have that campaign evaluation and review, and that'll be definitely based on what the next steps will be. Hopefully it'll be a positive result at the end. Hopefully the situation will be more positive than it is currently, and we'll be able to move forward. So that's it in a nutshell. It's Cliff Notes, but it's the just an overall summary. This is kind of a living document, and it's subject to change for sure. And again, we're open to any sort of ideas and input. We'll integrate that into the more detailed timeframe and plug it in as appropriate. So with that, I'm done. I appreciate your time, and I'll stand for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that presentation. I really do appreciate it. Ms. Martinez, you have your hand raised.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Griselda Martinez for the record. So interesting things have been happening in the last 24 hours, including some initiatives that we are heading into for the tourism component. And I will ask Rachelle Miller-Hernandez, our Executive Director for Vista Las Cruces, to expand on that. And I think there's a great opportunity for us to continue to leverage upon other things that are happening. And one item that I want to pose to you all is the name of the campaign. I believe that if we go with Las Cruces Promise, it's an option. Another option that we may want to consider is Las Cruces Safe. And the SAFE component will provide some type of action that relates to why we're doing this. And so that's something for the board's consideration, but I'll pass it on to Rachelle so she can speak more about what she's doing in terms of the tourism component.
So hello, everyone. To reiterate what Griselda just said also on the Las Cruces Safe, what we've done is we've looked at other municipalities, and they're using, several of them are using that term. And just to let you know from a marketing aspect, for example, Visit Las Cruces, you've got Visit El Paso, you've got Visit Santa Fe. A few years ago, and several others, Visit San Antonio, Visit San Diego. Several years ago, we all moved to that because people didn't know what Convention and Visitors Bureau was. What I'm also finding is everyone, or a majority of locations, are using Safe, like San Antonio Safe, Santa Fe Safe, Taos Safe. So what will happen in our experience is people will associate that with this initiative. So that's why I feel that would be a good way to go as far as the name of this initiative. The other thing that we're doing on the tourism side is several cities within the state are reinforcing the mask requirement. And so we're putting together a draft right now of a poster that really just says it how it is in a nice way, but just says you have to wear a mask because that's what you have to do in New Mexico. And if you don't, you might be fined. And we plan on printing a significant amount of copies. We're going to be passing them out to hotels, restaurants, businesses that we think will be frequented by visitors. The governor has given the tourism department an initiative of getting the word out to visitors that you do have to wear a mask in our state. But the other side of this is it will also remind our residents. A big thing that's happening right now too, I don't know, we're going to push it on our socials, is the 14-day quarantine. Because now it doesn't matter how you come into the state, you have to quarantine. That's becoming an issue with some of our hotels, but we are going to get the message out. Right now, we're not printing anything on that because that order is now only good until July 15th. The mask order, I believe, will, there's a strong possibility, or it will be around for a long time. So we can definitely put some more effort into that. But the 14-day quarantine we'll see how that goes. So those are just a few of the initiatives that we're working on that I think can help both your board and the tourism aspect of some of our public health orders. Griselda, I give it back to you.
Thank you, Rachelle. So that's something that, based on the press conference from the governor yesterday afternoon, we thought as being needed. And so it ties really well with the recommendation from the board for the campaign of awareness. And so I just wanted to bring that information to you also. You knew that that's also in the works to be built upon. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Wonderful, thank you. Ms. Debbie Moore.
Yes, just a couple of, am I on? Yeah. Just to put Debbie Moore for the record, just a point of clarification to staff. I believe in my motion last week when we accepted this as initiative, we agreed upon the name Las Cruces Safe Promise. And I believe that's what it was today, was just to be a timeline back forward and sort of the guidelines that we were going to move forward as presented, as we voted on last week. That's what I understood I made the motion on. And since we don't have the minutes, that's what I thought I had said. So I think we have a name of it. I think the timeline is good. I think there's several pieces of that. One thing I want to reiterate, I too am getting ready to put out some information from the chamber standpoint regarding the yesterday's conference. I'm working with the state chambers on getting some information out. As an aside, I think the important part of the Safe Promise for Las Cruces, it's ours. And it is specific to our citizens, our businesses, and it's simple. It is based on, Chris is going to show you in just a second, it's based on the city of Santa Fe. And then at the bottom, we will, of our website too, we will reference that we are in support of New Mexico Safe Certified. And just for point of clarification, all of the industries are now up. I believe the discussion last week was it was just hospitality. The chamber is now Safe Certified. We've gone through all the steps to make it happen. And so that is going on with us. So that is where I thought this was going. Thank you, staff. I just don't want to dilute what the motion was last week. And so that just so if that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate that. And I believe that Ms. Martinez, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Gisela Martinez for the record. Ms. Moore, we will go back to the minutes and make sure that we are following the motion that you recommended. And for the certified program, they expanded, the only item that they expanded it to was for office. And although that includes a bigger portion of businesses, it's still some businesses are excluded from the certification program. So just wanted to make that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. I am going through the minutes right now.
Can I just respond to Ms. Martinez, Mr. Chair?
Yes, of course.
So Ms. Martinez, Debbie Moore for the record, cannot most industries, at least for the time frame, when I went through it, there was like 4, 5, 6 industries in there. And I actually literally had to do the call center one and the retail one for us to fit. Is it your opinion that potentially, let's just say 90% of our industries could find a sector at least to go through for that safe component preliminary? Between that and the promise, I mean, that was my assumption that I researched it all, is that between the Safe Promise and the certification, we could realistically get 90% of our businesses to do one or the other. Or both, I should say both, not one or the other.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Debbie Moore, I believe a big portion of businesses could be covered within the certified program. I will defer to Rachelle. We were having this very discussion yesterday, and I believe in the list of the All Together campaign, there are still some items that are not included, but let me go to that right now so we can discuss that. But another item that may be important is we can move forward with the plan as is, and as we launch items, they may include every business. That's another possibility, since they are moving more quickly than what we thought it was going to be in the certified program.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that clarification, of course. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show you what the Santa Fe Promise looks like. I think it kind of goes over what we've been really talking about and discussing. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay. I have to grant access. Give me 1 second, guys. Sorry. But just so you all know, the Santa Fe Promise was started I think me and Debbie figured out that it was starting a little bit, it was preemptive almost. It was starting in February or March, I believe. Never mind, I'm not going to share my screen as I would have to restart my computer. If maybe one of the members of staff can share the Las Cruces promise at Santa Fe, New Mexico, nm.gov/promise. We could take a look at, because I think it's really good actually. And it's kind of a really good starting beginning point, but I'll just read it out loud really quick. It says, this is the Santa Fe promise. We will stay safe ourselves and keep each other safe as we combat the spread of COVID-19 in our community. Oh, there it is. Wonderful. Thank you. We will open our city and re-engage with our families, our shops, stores, and restaurants, re-engage with fun that makes Santa Fe such a special place to live, work, visit, and thrive. You guys can follow along there. And we will do this together. Safe together, open together, all together. So please remember the basic code of conduct that is the heart of the Santa Fe promise. And then it goes over a couple of promises, and it says, I promise to act as if I carried the coronavirus. I promise to maintain social distancing of at least 6 feet. I promise to wear a face covering, wash my hands, use sanitizer. I promise to buy from local businesses that also make this promise. And I promise to practice patience, compassion, empathy, connection, respect, and love. So it kind of goes over, you know, I promise, if you promise, if we all promise, we can get through this together type of thing. And then it kind of goes over the Santa Fe promise is who we are and how we live. It's how we make it through the difficult times. It's how we care about each other and our community. I know Santa Fe, I know we'll come out of this time of challenge stronger and more united than ever. Resilient and confident in our ability to stand together. We'll come through this safe, open together. Thank you. And then it's signed by Mayor Alan Weber. And then it kind of gives a couple different links at the closer to the bottom about contacting your visitor center, your libraries, your chamber of commerce. And then it also says, get your business certified, visit NM Safe Certified, and it gives a link there. And then it also gives a link to the governor's Department of Health COVID safe practices. And that has it in English and Spanish, which is very, very important to have it in both. And that was kind of like a really good groundwork foundation of what I thought that this group, our first proposal would be to kind of come up with, like we were talking about, and like what Rachelle was talking about is doing some kind of Las Cruces promise or Las Cruces Safe promise, like we talked about. But this could be kind of like the first major talking point that we can do is come up with this and then build off of this using the 3-month timeline that we were presented by Ms. Rickman. So that's kind of like the thought that, you know, what we found that really kind of fit what we were all talking about over the last couple of meetings. So that is the City of Santa Fe Safe promise or promise. Ms. Debbie, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this by any chance? I know that you were looking at it as well.
I think you did a good job. I think it kind of summarizes the initial step and something easy to promote. Debbie Moore for the record. Mr. Chair, the only comment would be in the light of the governor's press conference on yesterday, and I have been reiterating for the altogether CSPs, and as we move through the promise piece and the certification piece, I think it's important. There's a lot of communication right now on the mask and the enforcement of the mask, which is great discussion. But I personally, I look at it, masks are a part of the whole promise. It's a piece of the promise. And I think that's important for us all to realize. And Mr. Chair, my only other question would be to Ms. Martinez or Mr. Perez or Jamie, someone. I thought were we unable to see a draft logo this time? Were we too soon on that?
Mr. Chair, Ms. Moore, we were aiming to have one. Unfortunately, we had a couple of burning items that we needed to turn in by today this morning, so that distracted us from that. But we can send a few options via email, and so we can we can have that instead of waiting for next week, we can start finalizing those prototypes and then
Okay.
share with you as options.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. So with this kind of, since we've seen the timeline now and we've also kind of seen the Santa Fe promise, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the board for any discussion that you guys might have, any really good ideas that we might be able to incorporate. If the board wants to go ahead and raise their hand, we can start discussing this. Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Doug Cowan, for the record. Yesterday or the day before, I happened to catch a media advertisement from Walgreens, and it was exceptionally well done. They were promoting the entire safety issue and at the same time promoting, doing business in a safe manner, and kind of going with the theme that we're talking about, showing a success, and at the same time taking the precautions in that success. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of that, and I'm not sure if somebody else could be able to dig one of those up, but it was done exceptionally well, and it might have a good, it might give us a good idea for maybe some video type of promotion on this entire campaign as we continue to put it together.
Awesome, thank you. If you do find that, please do send that to a member of staff so they can get that out for us if you find it online. Any other comments from the board about what you've been listening to and hearing about this? Is this something that we all can get on board with and turn into an action item for the city council to start implementing? Mr. Harris.
Yeah, I think this is great. I'm on board. I like it.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Harris. I did send some questions to that I kind of just wanted to go over really quick if Mr. Rickman can hop on. Just a couple of clarifying questions with these is when we were looking at month one, establish a logo messaging the approach. I did put in there something about maybe marketing and how we're going to look at a grassroots campaign. I don't know how that looked for the census. I wasn't really following that as closely as I did. I filled mine out and turned it in. But was there a big grassroots campaign with the census that we could build off of, or is that something that we could look at that might be a little more specific to this Las Cruces promise that we're looking at?
Oh, thank you, sir. This is Jamie Rickman for the record. Absolutely. What we did, we created a complete counts committee that involved both the ad hoc committees from the Las Cruces, city of Las Cruces, and the county of Doña Ana. And each government agency had a resolution that created the ad hoc committee, and we joined forces. And then we opened our membership up to everyone who was instrumental in participation, and basically everyone who represented various government agencies who would benefit from census funding. And that way we got feedback from them on their needs. Of course, the county's piece of that was very extensive because they have more to deal with. For our part, we focused just within the city limits. And so with regard to that, we listened to the committee members and developed consistent messaging for them and provided materials for distribution, however that distribution looked like for those individual entities. And that could be just as flyers on a countertop, or, as clients would come in, they would promote those flyers, or it could be yard signs, it could be social media. There's lots and lots of different methods. And we were trying to appeal to every method possible that people would let us know that they needed. And so the funding, which the county handled, and we had a little pot of money for ourselves for the city of Las Cruces, because this was an unfunded mandate for us to pursue. We focused on utility billing and signs, flyers, posters, countertop, little trifold countertop tent things. just everything to be able to catch attention. And then we had a complete social media campaign where, as I mentioned in the timeline, we asked people to share their, to have likes and to share the content that we put on there, because that's where we get our traction. We also boosted social media, which targeted certain areas. Those certain areas that we targeted were the lower count areas, because the census, the government was able amazingly to provide almost real-time counts of participation in the census. And so those low areas that were not responding very well, we were able to target some of that social media to those areas. And so we're still kind of digging out from some of the data that we had received from that. We also did a lot of advertising in terms of traditional print advertising and television advertising, that sort of thing. And so we've got a lot of statistics from that as well. But that's sort of the grassroots that we're talking about. I was going to mention some yard signs. I think that would be effective to be able to produce a number of yard signs with whatever messaging that we have available for businesses to put in onto their properties. It's a very visible sort of thing, and it's more visible than, say, the posters, which I think are still important too, but they're more visible from the street side than the posters in window fronts and things along that line. So, what we're looking at are these strategies that we've used in the past campaigns. I just mentioned the census because it's the most recent one, but we have some other campaigns that we're working on as well that we will use everything in our toolbox to be able to put out in the community.
Wonderful, thank you for that. I appreciate that very much. With the utilities, did we get El Paso Electric on board on any of these, or is that something that we can look at, or is that more out of the realm of the city?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Jamie Rickman for the record. El Paso Electric, I haven't approached them yet. When I referred to utilities, it was the City of Las Cruces utilities, because that's a process that I handled, and it's very, I know that detail. What we'll have to do is be able to contact El Paso Electric, figure out what their timeline is, what their cost is, because, and then obviously what their reach is. It's going to be a lot more than the 44,000, I think, obviously. So that will be helpful, but that's still research that we have to do, and that's easy. I mean, I could probably accomplish that easily by the end of this week or next week. And we'll integrate that as appropriate as we can. So again, it's going to end up as being a funding issue, right? So.
Of course, thank you. I appreciate that. Ms. Martinez.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jamie. One item for the Las Cruces utilities that would include water, gas, and solid waste, right, Jamie?
Yes, and recycling. Yeah, all solid waste, water, gas. I think
so, Mr. Chair, since we want to do a quick launch and be as timely as possible, we can start with the City of Las Cruces utilities and expand as needed and within the budgetary options that we may have. So we would still reach out about 44,000 based on the numbers that Jamie has provided and based on her past experience. And so we would do, with the proposal that Jamie provided, we would do month 1 and 2 on insert, and then see what the response is, and then adjust as needed for month 3.
Wonderful, thank you. Mr. Harris, you have your hand raised, sir.
Yeah, so actually the mention about EPE brought up an interesting point, which is that we probably want to make sure that we're cross advertising this, not just in Las Cruces, but also into El Paso, because we do, get quite a bit of traffic between Cruces and El Paso on a day-to-day basis. Not just people working, but people who live here or live there, have partners in the other city, et cetera. And I think it's important to, make sure that those people get reached. That's one of the interesting things about the 14-day quarantine is, what do you do about a 14-day quarantine for somebody who travels between Texas and New Mexico daily? But I also think it's a good idea, like Griselda mentioned, to launch locally first, get stuff running, and then expand to other areas.
Definitely. Thank you for your input. I appreciate that.
This is Rachelle. If I could interject very quickly, the state is also doing an initiative where they, and I should get copies here soon, they're going to be doing advertising in our drive markets. I didn't hear El Paso being included in that, but Austin, Dallas, Phoenix, Tucson, etc., where they're taking full page ads out, saying, and they're calling them quote unquote love letters, like, we love you, we love this about your city, but when you come to New Mexico, this is what we do in our state. And it's all about wearing masks when they come. I don't know if they're revising that a little bit now because of what happened yesterday with the quarantine, but maybe we can see how that goes, and maybe that's some kind of initiative you all might want to look at for El Paso. Just thought I'd give you an update on that.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Any other discussion, or anyone else want to interject with what we have so far? No. Okay. Okay. So with that being said, I know that we need to somehow put this to a vote for bringing it to the city manager to take to city council. If Ms. Martinez, hoping you can answer this for us.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Griselda Martinez for the record. So we've spoken to city manager about how to proceed for the recommendation of an action item. He has given us the guidance, since this will be an administrative process. It would take an actual vote as an action item from the board. And then from Mr. Chair, if you can just, similar to the report that has been provided to city manager before, and he would be able to just give the okay and inform city council on this action. It does not require to be before city council as a resolution, which is a good thing to shorten the timeline for us to continue moving forward. And so in the meantime, staff is working on the prototype for the logo. And as you have seen, working with Jamie and Rachelle to have action behind this and be ready as soon as this, the final approval comes from city manager. So if this can be included as an action item in the agenda for next week, that can be a quick turnaround and for us to just have that as the formal final okay.
Okay, so with that being said, we cannot take an action on this at this point in time in the meeting. What we would have to do is put it on the agenda for next week to make it an action item that is votable on by this board. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. Okay,
So board, we will have this, which we probably need to come up with a name for it, which I think we're going to check and see if Ms. Moore did have that in the motion that she made last meeting, calling it the Las Cruces Promise or Las Cruces Safe. It was one of the two. I remember talking about it. So we will definitely have this as a votable action item next week and go through it that way. So with that being said, Mr. Cohen, yes.
Yes, Doug Cowan for the record. Maybe we could clarify, there's been a lot of discussion. What is exactly going to be the action next week? What is it that we're going to be looking at voting on, the specific action?
So the vote would be on the action of bringing this forward to the city manager to present to the city council for what we have been talking about today. So going over that 3-month timeline of what we're going to be doing. The Las Cruces Promise is what I'll call it for now. Taking this this document that we just went over and talked about and bringing that forth as an actionable item to the city council, saying that this is what we're wanting to do, where they can okay it so that we can further the work on this with the Economic Development Board and everyone included on this call today to go forth and make this an actual thing that we're doing here locally. Mr. Cohen.
So I'd like to just make sure that we're all on the same page, or at least that I understand where we're at with this. And I think Ms. Moore brought mention of this earlier in our conversation. What we're proposing is something that we, along with anybody else that wants to jump on board, whether it's a citizen or another business manager or employee, that they're going to make this promise, the Las Cruces Safe promise, and it's a voluntary promise, that we're not, because there's already entities telling everybody what they must do, i.e. the face mask. So we know that there's entities already out there saying, this is what you have to do. And we're saying, this is what we are doing. And we're volunteering to say, if you come into our place of business, we're practicing these safe practices according to the guidelines. Am I correct on that?
You are correct. So this is a campaign that will be being put forth by the city of Las Cruces through our board being almost like a vector, I would say. But our board would be presenting this to the city council as a way to engage with citizens in Las Cruces to feel more comfortable going to businesses, knowing that businesses that pick up our Las Cruces Safe promise, saying this is what I agree to, this is what we are practicing in our walls, that citizen of Las Cruces, traveler, whatever it is, knows that this is the promise that we've made, and we are asking that you make that promise as well to us, that you will practice social distancing in our establishment. You will practice like you have COVID, and you will take forth that responsibility to your person to go forth into the community and act appropriate. That's what this is. Any other comments, discussion on this product that we are developing?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mrs. Moore.
So in response to Mr. Cohen, Debbie Moore for the record, I think my whole thinking process in this is somehow we are promoting being safe as a community, not just the business community, but everyone. We know the guidelines, we know how the enforcement's going to be taken care of, but we're committing to safety, all of us as a unit, however that evolves. And that's where the grassroots is. We're Las Cruces Safe, basically. So yes.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. I appreciate that. Okay, so staff, is there anything that I need to do at this present time to get this as an action item, or is me verbally telling staff to make this a action item to go forth good enough?
Mr. Chair, this is David Maestas. First, I want to thank Griselda for so eloquently noting the process as we had discussed it previously. So thank you for that, Griselda. And then to answer your question, Mr. Chair, yes, you simply, and it appears the committee agrees, making the statement that this will be an item on next agenda. It will appear as an action item for your next meeting. Thank you.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Is there a vote needed at this time to make it an action item, or is this good enough?
No, sir. As chair of the committee, you set the agenda with the help of staff. And again, with concurrence of the committee, this is an item that they do want to have discussed and acted on. So that simply takes care of it.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for joining us today as well.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that being said, we do have an action item for next week's meeting. It will be an important one because we will probably be having a logo presented to us and probably a couple other materials as far as this goes on the timeline. With that being said, is there any other discussion from the board on anything else at this time?
Mr. Chair, just to make sure, this is Francisco Payares for the record. Are we on future discussion items now? Or are we still discussing, we're no longer discussing this, the Las Cruces recovery, the New Mexico, the Las Cruces Safe Promise campaign, right?
I was referring to the Las Cruces Safe Promise, and we're about to move on to future discussion items. So yes, we can definitely move on now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
With that being said, moving on to future discussion items. So we do have a large project that we are now working on. Is there any, Ms. Montgomery? I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Miss Montgomery, or Brooke Montgomery for the record. Just something that happened this week that I wanted to bring up and maybe or maybe not have a future discussion about. My grandson went to daycare because my daughter needed to go back to work. And he was around a child who had COVID-19, and he was around him for 4 days straight. And so our entire family got tested, and we got the results back negative this morning, just so you know. So it was very nerve-wracking and very high stress. But I'd like to say some things that made me think about for this particular board is they closed the daycare down. She had nowhere to take him. She didn't know if she could go into work. And we all actually stayed quarantined because we didn't want to potentially spread it if we were in contact. And it could have affected, luckily, myself and my husband can work remotely, but it could have had a greater effect on our family economically. So I just wanted to see if maybe a future discussion could be what happens if the employees aren't able to work or daycares have to shut down for a week, because that was recommended by the New Mexico Department of Health. They said shut the daycare down. Everybody at the daycare goes home, all those employees go home, and everybody get tested and quarantined for 14 days. So
Thank you. I don't know if that's a board discussion more or less, because that's, if you do read the New Mexico reopening guidelines, it goes over workforce solutions, which kind of states what a business should do if this happens. And through workforce solutions, they do have protections in there to be furloughed and or receive funding from the state government as you're not able to return to work. So I definitely think that might be something that maybe we can go over, is those guidelines, so everyone's familiar with them, or we can send it out to the group, because it's a huge working document from the state government, or from the governor, and it's called All in This Together. And it's huge. It's absolutely huge. And it's kind of like the Bible as far as this goes. I know that's Debbie's favorite thing to call, is the reopening Bible. But I will send it out, because I think we haven't even really talked about it as a group. And I think that might be something really good to bring up next week. So maybe I'll put on the agenda the All in This, or All Together New Mexico, so we can kind of just go over it maybe, because it is actually a really good working document that does go off, like safe practices for everyone, but also what to do if this happens and where you go and who you contact and all that good stuff. So that might be a really good thing for us to do. So I appreciate that. Maybe that is a good idea, a very good idea. Mr. Cohen, I saw your hand raised, sir.
Thank you, Doug Cowan. I've been pondering this all week, and this board exists, and the question I wrote down was, what is our ultimate goal? And so this advisory council, this advisory board, our goal is to help make recommendations for an economic recovery. And so, in fact, falling right in line with what Ms. Montgomery had just brought up, what are the implications? You know, you have something happen where all of a sudden a child's daycare is not available. That's a whole domino effect. And so considering how to get economic recovery, it kind of boils down to two very simple main points. And one is consumer confidence. And under that, it would have to be financial and social, right? And right now, social seems to be perhaps maybe the bigger of the two, although certainly in different income brackets that financial has a certain impact. But then also that comes right back into the business viability. So if a business is not able to operate because they're mandated to close down for 2 weeks or whatever it is, that's going to have an impact on the recovery. And so I think somehow or another where there's some kind of plan or helping businesses with a plan, short term and then midterm. They should already have a long-term goal. We wouldn't, I don't think that's our initiative, but I think helping them through this point of time and then continuing to build that consumer confidence financially and socially, those three all link together. And so I think there should be some discussion on how to help, maybe in that exact scenario that Ms. Montgomery brought up. All the employees at that daycare are perhaps without income. I'm not sure how they're set up, but that's certainly going to be an impact. The parents that have their children in that daycare now may not be able to work because they've got to stay home with their children. And it could be that they're all quarantined themselves, which is going to impact income, and it's going to impact other businesses. It's kind of a rolling snowball. And so I think we ought to address that and to see if there's a way that we can help overcome that in some case. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I do think that there's enough good minds in this panel that could come up with some good ideas.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Cohen. Mr. Harris, you have your hand up raised next.
Michael Harris for the record. At a previous meeting, I think Debbie Moore said that you're a part of the school district's reopening task force. I think it would be interesting to hear more about kind of their plans, because that's from my own experience with my own employees, is going to be a major economic recovery factor going into the fall. Right now everyone's kind of back into a somewhat normal state because schools are closed, and so people already had plans for taking care of their kids during the summer. But schools being closed into the fall is going to be a serious economic issue, I think. Probably, there's health issues aside, but I wonder if there's some things that we could recommend that the city do to help that. Because like Doug was saying, that's really our goal, is advise the city on what policies they should make to help us, everyone in the community. And I think the school district, they're a giant employer and a giant source of where kids go all day. So I think that would be good to talk about next time.
Okay, and Ms. Brooke Montgomery.
Thank you, Brooke Montgomery, for the record. Something else I thought about when going through this experience was, well, I have another daughter who has, I don't mind saying this, so she has 5 heart birth defects. And so she was quarantined. We have not been around her, so we knew she was fine. But also, what if we were around her? Or actually, to be honest, I have a heart birth defect and so does my mom. So it's genetic. And what if somebody died and I got really upset? I'm just throwing this out there, and sued the daycare, or sued somebody, just got really upset because I lost my mom or my daughter or something. And so it just made me think, like, I'm not saying I would have done that, but somebody might have that reaction, like, I lost a family member, I lost my grandson or my mom. And it's probably in that Bible that Debbie's talking about, or you guys have already. So I want to read it. I do think you may have sent it before I was joined, like right when I first joined the board. I think I saw it somewhere. So I will read it and find it. But I just, in case that's not in there, just some information for maybe us that don't know. What are the liability risks if something happens? I don't want anyone to die, obviously. But what is the liability risk on everybody?
Okay, thank you for that. Miss Debbie Moore, you have your hand raised as well.
I do. So I'll respond, Debbie Moore for the record, to Michael and all the comments. I also want to just remind us of the purpose about reopening. All of these things impact both individuals and businesses. Regarding the altogether, Brooke, it is like 52 pages. They updated about every 2 weeks, a month, about every 3 to 4 weeks. There is a lot of discussion around the liability issues of individuals versus businesses. The chamber, which is not the direct purpose of this group, but some of your business organizations are looking at that, how the health issues impact that in that regard. And I think, Michael, yes, I'm on the Las Cruces Public Schools reentry. I will tell you that there is going to be some information going out to the parents within the next day or two, no later than Monday, regarding some of their final choices. And so I think I would recommend we wait, and then there might be, I don't know, since both government agencies operate independently, the school board has its own board, which will ultimately be their decision, as well as the city council. They operate independently, but I certainly think we can look at that. And you are definitely correct. This whole thing is going to impact the business community, individuals tremendously, especially in Ms. Montgomery's, talk this morning about a daycare going out. So there's all kinds of conversations going on. I think that is some things we need to look at perhaps in the future. I just want to make sure now that we stay on getting things reopened, which we know right now it's kind of after yesterday's press conference. We need to make sure our kids in some fashion get back to school, which means we all have to be safe together. With that, Mr. Chair, if there's any questions more for me, I hope that answered, Mr. Harris, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you so much, Ms. Moore. Mr. George Miller, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry I'm late. George Miller for the record. Yeah, just as we're discussing that, it's there's a choice. It seems like with either work or if you have children, especially if you either work, you have a job, or you have the schools. And so if the schools aren't going to open full time, it's going to be a huge impact on how parents what they can do with their kids. So there's a capacity issue. I mean, even before in the spring we had problems, but before that, the city can probably help to make sure that there's. Yes. Can you hear me? Thank you. Sorry I'm late. George Miller for the.
You're okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm having. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you well. Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, there's George Miller for the record. It's there's a capacity issue a little bit in the city. If you're going to have a lot of children out several days of a week, maybe Debbie was talking about this a little bit, but just because the schools are open again, the kids are back in school, then what are the parents going to do those other couple of days? So there may be some assistance the city can give to either the daycares or after school programs. So that needs to be addressed. Someplace for the children to safely put their kids, I think. So there's that I second that topic as being a very, very crucial one. Otherwise the recovery will be crippled.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So can I please respond to Mr. Miller? Mr. Miller, one of the discussion points on the reentry from the school district is that very thing, because we're well aware that perhaps right now there is not the grandparents or the family that is there. It is a discussion point. We have not, according, working with Dr. Trujillo, the school district, we haven't got to the point where we need to figure out who we can go after for possible potential either donation support or whatever. I think the first piece is what will be happening in the next week will be the actual, we know schools are going to start August 12th. We're not real sure what that evolves in. But I think a reporting process to either here or there will be a reporting at the school board too, which I could certainly bring that to this board. I'm not sure that I don't necessarily make the connection as far as actions that we would make to the city, but I think that could change as they finalize their plans. I mean, they're talking about safety, master crime, and I could go on and on. We're meeting at 2 hours every week. So it's very in-depth discussion. So I promise to keep this board and the public informed as we move forward to see if there would be something that would impact the reopening purpose of this board. But I certainly think it's something we all need to be cognizant of.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Doug Cowan. I think we ought to move to put that that item on our discussion for next week. If Ms. Moore is going to have some more definitive information coming directly from the school district, and we would know more what their plans are, that will help us as we try to navigate helping to keep things on the economic side moving as well, so that we know what we're up against and what constraints might be in place. So I think we ought to put that on the discussion for next week concerning the school in the fall.
Mr. Chair, to Mr. Cowan's point, Debbie Moore for the record. Mr. Cowan, I'm not sure by next meeting there would be something firm, because I know there's another survey going out, but I can talk to, certainly maybe I can talk to Superintendent of Schools and see if she can give me like a one-pager where it would be informational versus action, because I think there's several steps they have to go through as a school district to get to that. But I would be happy to talk to her to see if we could at least bring an informational. But I doubt if it would be next week, because I know they're gonna have a survey. They're gonna have some different things happening. Maybe the next week after that.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so we've had a lot of great discussion that we could be looking at next time. Ms. Montgomery brought up some valid points that we could need to be looking at, as well as did Mr. Miller and Mr. Cohen. Mr. Miller, you do have your hand raised. Mr. Miller, your mic is off, sir.
Yes, sorry, Miller for the record. I keep hearing discussions about inclusive economic recovery. There's an article in the paper this morning about like a third of our residents in New Mexico didn't get any help with stimulus, and so it kind of ties into the people that are affected by this school that don't have childcare and things, with the schools are going to be half open. It's really affecting the poorer people. So is there somebody on the city council but the city that can help give us maybe a briefing about that, what that would look like for the city, or potential models or something that we could talk about? That would be something that still is, it's kind of floating. If you're talking about Black Lives Matter and Hispanic people of color, then that's a huge topic that we make sure we equalize whatever recovery we have. So we can have something like that at some point in the future. I'll keep bringing that one up, I think.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Ms. Martinez. Ms. Martinez, we can't hear you.
Mr. Chair, Griselda Martinez for the record. Mr. Miller, thank you for that comment. Would you please expand on what type of information or model you would be looking for in your comment?
There's several models that I've seen out there. It's generally they fall under the topic of like inclusive economic recovery model that addresses the issues raised by the Black Lives Matter, or about the economic the research about economic impact of COVID on the poor or people of color in New Mexico, or different backgrounds. And there's a disproportionate impact of both the crisis, but also the recovery. So just anything like that may be out there that other cities are using. I know sometimes it's just business models that there's always a menu item on the business that's $5 blue plate special, so people can come to the restaurants, that would like to, that cannot do that, but just so there's access, quality, and that kind of equity in whatever we do for all the different kinds of people, that addresses some of those issues, I think. I don't know if that helps a little bit. I haven't had time to look at so much about it, but there was a nice article in the paper this morning again about that, where there was some research about the impact in New Mexico of COVID, and And some of the leaders are calling for like an equitable recovery model, something like that.
Mr. Harris.
Mr. Harris, this is Michael Harris for the record. Something else I read about is that the city had, you know, kind of to that point, the city had a program to do restaurant vouchers. And there was some discussion about expanding that program. And so something that I'm curious about is, and perhaps we can get a presentation from staff, but what are the options for the city to do more direct, you know, that's more or less a direct stimulus program. I know that there's all kinds of issues with the anti-donation clause in the Constitution and whatnot, but it'd be interesting maybe for us as a board to get some more information on what the city's limits are, what programs they've considered already that could be kind of classified as this more direct stimulus just to people. And you know, maybe provide some input on other things that they could be doing.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Ms. Martinez.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Mr. Harris, unfortunately, the limitations on what we can do as direct stimulus are very limited because of the anti-donation clause, which is New Mexico's part of the Constitution. The only exception to that is when the city is providing direct services to the indigenous population. And the other option is the city to get in exchange of the help or the financial contribution, a service at a fair market value. And those are the only two instances that the city can act in terms of direct financial support, which provides quite a bit of limitation. Ms. Moore had, in a different discussion group, she had talked about other more grassroots efforts that can be mirroring some type of foundation. Unfortunately, the city is very limited in terms of potential direct stimulus that can go to either businesses or individuals.
Thank you for that. With that also, I have a question. When Mr. Harris was speaking about the restaurant vouchers, that did get renewed and extended, is that correct? About a week ago, I believe.
I believe that they were wrapping it up with our fiscal year, which ended on Tuesday. And so I will have to check with the staff liaison on that. I don't have the latest update on that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I think we've discussed some of these within different presentations. One of them is the like the bus fares to do away with the transit system fares. That's things like that are possible. I think there was questions and criticism of the voucher system because it wasn't equitable. It was given to some people, and some people didn't have access to it. So a better distribution model, I think. I always don't like to give out vouchers. I think sometimes some people just miss out. But so things like that. But those are the kinds of things that we could recommend, I think, that are really urgent.
Thank you for that. So with this being said, guys, we are at the hour-and-a-half mark. So I do want to start wrapping this up a little bit more. We do have one action item, and that is to put a vote to bringing our Las Cruces Safe Promise initiative to the city manager to present to the city council. But I do want to start narrowing down all these discussion items. I would definitely like to, we've heard some really good ideas so far, especially from Ms. Montgomery and Mr. Miller. We just need to give the city, our staff, some kind of direction as to where to go, because we keep saying issues, but we need to come up with some kind of concrete information to give them so they can go forth and get us what we need to bring back to us to present. So if there's someone that you guys can think about that we would love to have to present to us on this, or if there's some concrete evidence that says that, you know, this is the way that we need to be going, we need to bring forth that idea now, it would be nice to put it on the discussion where we're have some kind of presentation or some kind of information coming towards us. So if anyone has like a concrete person that we can contact to present to us based off of this information that we can give to staff to go forth and bring this information to us, I would really appreciate that at this time. Mr. Miller.
Yeah, one thing we've talked about several times is getting someone from Workforce Solutions or some of the economic, maybe an Arrowhead to present some of the programs they have for the business recovery. And also they have things for some of the economic recovery for the like employees and for some of the maybe lower people that don't have jobs. I would like to hear more about that. That's one potential.
Correct. And we're supposed to actually have a member from Workforce Solutions on this board, but I don't believe that position has been filled. But I would agree. I definitely think that getting someone from Workforce Solutions on here, and I know we did talk about that the last couple of meetings. So I would like to ask the board if we believe that's the right way to go on this to kind of figure out, and that does kind of go and coincide with what Ms. Montgomery did say about what happens when X, Y, and Z happens. So that might actually be a really good point. I would ask that if we could put that on the agenda for the next meeting to get someone from Workforce Solutions to present to us about what options are available for Las Cruces residents when the unexpected happens. I would be most appreciative. Ms.
Brooke Montgomery for the record. I do have my own business that's technology related, but I also work at Arrowhead Center. I could possibly get some information together and provide a presentation on what we're offering right now and maybe some suggestions that we've come up with. And I also work with our American Indian program, so I can also present some of the equity issues that we've seen with that program if we want to put that on the future discussion agenda or something like that. Also, the innovation question with the grants, I did look up after the meeting and I could present that. I was able to find out a little information on grant funding from the state and federal grant funding for businesses and entrepreneurs that have innovation, tech innovation. So I could throw that in.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Since we are more of a city organized board, I would definitely, I think that's a great idea and that's a great offer and I appreciate that. I think that first we need to look at Workforce Solutions since they should have a member on this board anyway. I think we need to get them in here to present. City staff, is that something that we can work on for the next meeting so we can go through the vote on the Las Cruces Safe promise and then have a Workforce Solutions representative or someone that is well versed in Workforce Solutions, because I know that is another thing that is constantly changing as the days go by and as Congress keeps meeting and passing things. Ms. Martinez.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we can reach out to Workforce Solutions and Connections to have a representative speak to us of resources to employees that are available for them.
I think that's amazing. So let's go ahead and what we're going to do then, board, is that we're going to have that action item, and then the second thing we're going to do is Workforce Solutions. If we do not get someone from Workforce Solutions by the time that we need to publish the agenda, I am going to go ahead and reach out to Ms. Montgomery, and then we can start working with the Arrowhead group and see if we can get a presentation on that. If that's okay with the board, I think that's what we are looking to do. Ms. Martinez.
What we could do, Mr. Chair, is have the discussion item on the agenda as we publish it. We can remove items from the agenda, but we cannot add. So if we don't,
if we're not successful at securing somebody to present, we can just table the item.
Perfect. Then let's go ahead and add both of those items to the agenda for the next meeting. Ms. Montgomery, if you would just please prepare something, or if you have someone with the arrowhead that can voice something about this, that would be really great. And then we can go from there. As far as the, yeah, so that's my finishing thought. Mr. Miller, I think I've read every single news article I can get my hand on. That's why I don't sleep until 3 a.m. If we could maybe start looking at that as well and try to figure out someone that can present on that. I know we are a vast network of information in this group of individuals that we have here. Mr. Miller, if you can start looking for someone that might be able to voice a little bit more, I appreciate that, sir. Thank you so much. With that being said, we do have all of our discussion items for next week. We will put out the agenda. We will get those minutes out to you for approval. With that being said, I would love to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
This is Michael Harris. I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. We have a motion to adjourn. Any second? Ms. Montgomery.
This is Brooke Montgomery. I second the motion to adjourn.
Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you next week at our regularly scheduled meeting. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.